Hi, I'm Brian Russell with Streamside Solutions. This video will explain how to configure equipment zones and map controlling actions based on triggered events from your reservation system. I'll be covering the following items in this video: equipment zones, event timelines, the equipment manager and the client, actions and triggers, how to map rooms, and end-to-end testing. We'll also walk through creating several different examples of zone schedule control. At this point, you should have the IT deployment phase completed, and both interfaces should be communicating prior to mapping. That includes the event provider and the device interfaces. However, it is possible to define the mappings without communications if you know the zone parameters, or you are using the CSV importing feature to do mass creation of equipment zone mappings. Before starting this phase of configuration, you should have a complete list of event provider rooms associated with physical HVAC zone occupied points. This process should be done by personnel that is familiar with the HVAC controls for each zone. Also, during testing, you should have access to the HVAC real-time system to verify end-to-end communications from Events2HVAC. This diagram shows how equipment items or zones in Events2HVAC work. You can also see the interface boundaries between the reservation system, Events2HVAC, and the HVAC system. For each zone that you want to control, you're going to create an equipment item. This typically is done one for each physical system or terminal unit. In cases where several terminal units are in the same zone, you can create one zone and have several actions for each terminal unit. For each item, you're going to map to the rooms from the event provider that are part of the zone. You're also going to create actions to control each of the terminal units within the zone. Each action has a trigger defined, so a command can be sent with a trigger from the schedules that are received. Internally, there are two sets of schedule data available for the zone: aggregated event schedules and daily zone first-last schedules. The aggregated schedules are a combined schedule of all the mapped rooms with the pre-start and post-stop times already adjusted for each event. The result of this is used to trigger event start-stop commands. The daily zone schedules represent the current day's first event start and last event stop. The result of this is used to trigger zone first-last commands so that the physical system is started and stopped on first event of the day and the last event of the day. This is useful for large air handlers that you don't want to cycle on and off throughout the day, or for controlling outside doors for a building. All of the scheduled event data retrieved by Events2HVAC contain the following periods shown in the event timeline. The center main event period is the scheduled event start and stop period. The event may or may not contain additional time for setup and teardown around the main event time. In Events2HVAC, these periods are the main event period and the booking period. Actions can be triggered around either periods to reflect occupancy for the zones. In addition, E2H can add a pre-start time and a post-stop time to the event timeline to allow for warm-up and cool-down of the room. The top timeline shows the occupancy period when using the event start-stop trigger. The bottom shows the timeline using the event setup teardown trigger. And the represented occupied time of the zone is shown in the green below each one. Some additional notes about pre-start and post-stop. Its primary purpose is to start the system in advance of the scheduled event time to allow for the system to reach set point prior to the event and to keep the system on after the event ends. They only apply to a single equipment item and are used in all dual action triggers that are defined for that item. They can easily be adjusted for each zone and for season changes. Also, post-stop can be negative to allow for early shut-off of HVAC prior to the event stop time. An alternative method of scheduling the zone is to use the zone first-last schedules. This method takes the first scheduled event and the last scheduled event for each day to determine the occupancy of the zone. This diagram shows the dynamic occupancy of the zone based on the actual events occurring for the day. Also shown is the typical fixed occupancy period for office hours. E2H can adjust around the base office hours schedule and handle events before and after normal hours. In Events2HVAC, all actions require a trigger to execute the action. Actions can come in two flavors, dual action and single action. Dual action triggers are used most often and trigger two-state actions, for example a start-stop, to control occupancy for the event. Single action triggers are one-shot triggers to a single action, for example sending a write property command to a set point. It is important to note that a single action trigger do not use the pre-start and post-stop values for the equipment. Only dual action triggers use these parameters. Now that we've discussed some of the concepts around equipment zones, let's go to the software now.